Behind this door is a room in a house I do not own, and I'm hoping to turn it into a place where I can record video. Join me as I show you how I'll set up the lighting and all the things to do with sound. This is a very ordinary house and a very ordinary bedroom, but like many people, I can't adjust much in this room. It is what it is, and I'm going to have to make do with the room and the gear that I have. First thing I notice about this room is that it has one natural light source. It's a bare window on one side. That can give a room a cave-like appearance as the light just streams in from one direction. And if you've ever lived in an apartment or a house or a room with just one window, you know how difficult and glary it is to live in, and that's the same with a camera. So we know there's a problem with the lighting. Straight up, one source of natural light, we're going to have to supplement with artificial light. Luckily in the room we have some spotlights. They are downlights, and we can adjust them a little bit, so we can change the angle a little bit, but I cannot rotate them. We've got two switches here, and that means that in the ceiling we can have a single light in the middle, or I can choose lights from the side. So that covers the overall light. And if we think about video, video is really about filming light. I'm looking at blank wall spaces that I can stand in front of and talk to camera. So in this session, we'll cover a lot of the framing of the overall view and the overall light for the subject, which will be me. And that will differ depending on where I am in the room. But immediately I can see there's potentially a good space over here because there's quite a lot of wall around that area, and we have some natural light flowing from the window. It's important to recognize this window faces south, and so where I live in the southern hemisphere in Australia, I get no direct sunlight coming into the room. That means I should always get a soft glow. However, we can see outside that it is cloudy. On a day where we have more sun, or sun moving in and out of the clouds, that will affect the light falling behind me. It will come up and down depending on whether it's moving in and out of clouds or the time of day. So one of the options we have here is to remove the natural lighting completely and light it artificially. I would do that if I was doing a mixture of daylight filming and nighttime filming, and I wanted to have the same look. Because in my case I'll be doing a lot of daytime filming, I'm quite happy to use that natural light. And we can see the sun has come out as I was talking. We can see the sun has popped out a little bit, and that's probably changed the background a little bit. We'll cover more of that when we switch to the M50 and see it in greater detail. But if I wanted to work purely at night, then I might use a different wall. I might block off the window that's in front of me so I can really control the light. The other wall that might be useful as a backdrop is this wall over here. In this case, I've set up my computer, which I'll also talk you through today. And so I probably won't use this wall. There's not a lot of light in this corner or this part of the wall, although it is quite flat compared with this line shifting across the top. And likewise on this wall, we don't see any lines moving across it. So perhaps that wall would give me more of an even color. And as a really minor thing, there is a screw in the wall right here, and that will be annoying for me standing in front of it or knowing that it's in the shot. But I don't think the audience will notice it, and that's fine. Again, this is a rental. There's very limited things I can do. I cannot add more screws to any of the walls. That would void my lease. The landlord would not be happy. I need to work with what I have. There's also a name stuck up on the wall, so we've called this Dylan's room. We don't know who Dylan is. Again, it's a rental. And that will be very awkward if it's in the shot. For instance, if I'm talking to camera like this and have Dylan in the background, it's going to be a bit confusing. All right, so let's look. We've had a quick look at the room and I'll talk about the gear in a moment. Before I do that, what can we say about the room? It's pretty small. Let's see how many steps across it takes to move across the room. I'm fairly tall, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4.5, so it's about 4.5 meters wide and probably 6 or 7 deep. Generally, I prefer a room that is deeper behind me. My last studio had a lot of depth behind me and it just makes it a lot easier to film. And in my last studio, I had the camera set up pretty much like this in front of a large window. So I had good light on me and I could really block out the background, which I'll show you a few techniques today, but we'll run through a few options for that. But before we do that, let's have a look at the gear that we'll be working with. First of all, I have a large tripod. That's very stable. That generally stays in my studio. I find it quite large, and so I don't like taking it out of the studio unless I'm going somewhere I'm going to be there for a long time. So that will stay here. I've also got a couple of travel tripods which I can throw up on the table. I've got an extension lead for microphones. As you may have seen at the beginning of the clip, I also have a lapel mic plugged in because I'm filming with the DJI Osmo Action. Moving along, we'll be using the Canon M50 and we'll start with the 15 to 45mm kit lens. That covers all the focal ranges that we'll be using today. I have a spare battery for the camera because it will not last that long. I've got a couple of 35mm lenses. This is a 2.8, whereas the rest of these lenses are all manual. We'll use it automatic on there. With the Canon M50 today, we'll mostly film in 1080p. So I've got a 35mm lens that goes down to 2.8. And as I said, 35mm is in the range of the Canon M50. So I can set up my shot using the kit lens, and then I can switch to the other one when I'm sure I've got a good frame. I've also got a couple of 50mm lenses, so again, this will all be manual focus. I think this one's a 58. It is great lens, and I've got another video coming on that one shortly. I don't know if we'll use this one today. We'll probably use mostly the 58 when it comes to that lens. I've also got a hat, just so you can see the difference in the lighting if you're wearing a hat, if you're not. And I've got a number of t-shirts that I can wear depending on what the setup is and if it changes the appearance of the shot. For some of the lighting, I've got a 100-watt LED globe, so that's like an outdoor light that I picked up off eBay for something like $15. Super cheap and really effective. I've got a double adapter or a power socket for a bunch of lights, and I've also got a diffuser that I can place over the light in multiple layers to diffuse it. Now again, if I wanted to, I could use the diffuser on the window, and I could use that, hang that up on the hooks and use that to diffuse some of the light coming in. I'm not going to be doing that today, but I may be using it to diffuse the light itself. I can also use that diffuser as a bounce. So if I put it up against a wall, I can put the light against the diffuser and we can use that. So only a couple of other things here to mention. One is my camera bag. I love all these videos that say what's in my camera bag. I don't even have a camera bag. I literally just have this roll top waterproof bag that I keep my M50 in, and say my microphones and other things. I keep that in that bag, and then I chuck that bag in any bag I'm taking. The reason I use this is that it is waterproof, and the Canon M50 is not waterproof, so I just throw it around in that bag, or I can chuck it in the car. I don't have a dedicated camera bag. The other thing that I've got here, I've mentioned that I've got some travel tripods. I've listed 2 today because I'm not always going to be filming in the studio. Occasionally I'll just take a tripod with me with the camera, but that means I can leave the other one set up in the studio pretty much in the position I want it, and I'll be ready to go. My other option there is to have some C-clamps and to set up a permanent rig, and I quite like that idea because then if you have some framing, so for instance if I had the N in the shot in a particular way from this view, not that I'd want to, but if I did want to do something like that and I had a camera permanently set up, then I know it's always going to be in that position. If I'm controlling my lighting, it wouldn't matter what time of day I film, what day I film, I can keep that continuity. So part of the reason to have a travel tripod is I won't always have the M50 in the studio. Put it on the travel tripod or stick it in my bag, and I can just head out of here really quickly, knowing that my studio is set up to film in when I get back. I've got some extension leads for microphones, so if I want to plug in a lapel mic and I want to keep the cord going all the way from the camera to me, well, I can do that. Or if I want to place a shotgun mic up near the ceiling somewhere or hang it off one of these racks, then I could do that, and then I could get better sound the closer my microphone is to me, so that's there. And then lastly, I've got the mirror, and the only reason I have this is to show you what I'm filming on, which is the DJI Osmo Action, and that's what we're using today. But mostly we'll be using the Canon M50, so I'm only using the DJI Osmo to show you what I'm doing with the Canon M50, because the Canon M50 will be my primary studio camera. Let's talk a little bit more about the lighting, and we'll concentrate on what kind of effects we can get with the lighting. So we have a 100-watt globe, we have the ceiling mounts, and we also have a couple of desk lamps. So I've got a desk lamp that I can use, and I can move that around. Well, it's just about to fall off, so I'll stick that back on. It's just held on with a clamp. Great. And I also have a larger, taller IKEA lamp. I stuck two lamps together just to get it up nice and high, because generally we want the light above us to give us that natural lighting look. What else have we got here? We've also got a guitar. I might use that as a prop. If not, I'll just rip it out of here and we won't use it. And this is where I do a lot of my editing. Quick tip for you, I hate having stuff on the ground. I don't like having all these cables here, by the way, but in terms of my computer itself, I don't like having it on the ground. So all I've done is cut out a plywood shelf and stick it on this standard IKEA desk, lifts it off the ground and just keeps dust out of it, and I can clean up quite easily. So that's the other side of it, where I've just placed a plywood sheet on top of it. This is where I edit my videos, and I also have a keyboard set up that I can pull out and play music. I'm thinking about adding music to my videos. But we'll leave that for another day, because this is really about setting up the studio, not so much about music. But I want this studio to be multi-function, that I can use it for making music, we can use it as a spare bedroom, and I can use it for filming. And this will be pretty common to a lot of uses of a lot of studios, that you may not have a dedicated space 100% of the time, but how can you quickly shift from, I don't know, a spare bedroom or a music studio into a place where you can film. And today we'll just look at some setups so that I know I can come back anytime, set them up, and away we go. Back to lighting. Let's start with, what does this room look like if I switch off all the lights and I only have the window? So this is an example of what I meant by a cave-like appearance, and I'll shut this door so we don't have light from two sides. That's what I mean by a cave-like experience. You have light streaming through one area, and generally in a room, let alone a studio, you want light from two directions. If you look at most architecture that works well, you have light from at least two sides. But it's not unusual to have a bedroom like this with just one window. You can see that I've made one change to this room and this window. I've removed the blinds that sat across the top. And the reason I've done that is that I'm quite tall. If I've got light coming in from the side and I have a blind that's pulled up to allow that light to come in, but I'm blocking the top section of the window, and I'll be lighting the lower part of my body but not my face, and we want to light my face. We can see that the room is also grey. I like that. I don't generally like filming with a light background which is either white or beige. There's a bedroom next door. Let's go and check out what the difference is between a grey wall with blinds and a beige wall like this. Now immediately this room has a lot more natural light because we have more light bouncing off the walls. So if I was to be here, this is more of the view that you would have in this room. And just personally, I don't like the warmth of the beige. I prefer it as more of a neutral. And here's an example where we can see the blinds are in and up, and they're blocking some of that top light. So you can see the top of my head is kind of chopped off from the light, and we've just got the light streaming below that. That's an example of why I've taken the blinds off the window. Let's head back in. The other thing we can see in this room is that it has just one door to enter. So just one window, one door. And generally, I don't like the idea of framing my shots with a door behind me. I talked about framing shots with Dylan behind me. Framing a shot with a door behind you is also a problem because it's kind of like bad feng shui, which is that you don't want to have your back to a door. For the audience who are watching this, there's always the possibility that someone will walk through a door. That's what doors are for, they're to be walked through. Anytime you're talking about anything, there's a potential that someone could walk through that door. Turns out this door only goes to a cupboard, but it doesn't change the fact for the audience, they're kind of primed to think about doors as something that people move through, and subconsciously you're expecting that. As I move deeper into the cave-like space with just the one source of light, and I turn my back towards it, I'm pretty much disappearing. This camera is struggling probably with its ISO at this level. So we've talked about the positives of the room. This window is quite large. We'll get a lot of natural light through it. We have grey walls and a blank space largely in this section, at the back of the room, and on this side of the room. So there's at least 3 areas that we can use with a flat background. Unfortunately, we cannot use the corners. In this corner we have an air conditioner and a window competing with it. This corner has a door, and I've already spoken about how weird it looks to talk to camera by a door. Let's just test that out. If I was trying to present like this and talk to you about lens or anything, it's just odd. It's as if someone is going to walk through this door any second and squash me. And so that, I don't think doors work for that reason. The same is happening in this corner, and that really leaves, I think, this space today that we'll mostly work with, mainly because the computer is set up on this side. All right, let's start switching lights on and set up the M50 in various positions here and see what we can do. While I do this, some of the other benefits of this room which may not be immediately obvious. Number one is that it is carpeted. Now I know we're going to talk mostly about lighting, but sound is crucial for good filmmaking and good presenting to camera. If this room wasn't carpeted, we'd be in big trouble. That's because it's almost a cube shape, and a cube shaped room is the worst shape for good sound. We have a lot of reverberation and echo in a room that is cube shaped. Because we've got carpet, we have some dampening of the sound from the ground. And we also have some soft furnishings with the bed, which will hopefully dampen some of the sound. Compare it with this room, which is also a cube. I'm in a different house and the room is slightly smaller, but the key difference is there are tiles on the floor. Notice how much of a difference it makes to the overall echo. Alright, so I've set up my M50, and generally what I'm going to do is get it up around my eye height and have that direct level view as if I'm talking, well, just like this, as if I'm talking to camera. We can play around with it being a little lower, so looking up at me, and a little higher. Now, even with this DJI Osmo, I can already tell which of those three I really, really dislike. So which are any of these terrible for you? A low down shot, an eye level shot, and looking down at me from above. Now, the next step I'm going to do with the Canon M50 is just make sure I've got my settings correct. And the key one is that I want to have my screen displaying for a long time. If I'm not filming, which I'm not at the moment, after about a minute or so, this screen will go black. Now, because we're going to be spending a lot of time setting up, I want this screen to stay on whether I'm filming or not, so I can see what's going on with it. Now, to do that, I'm going to go into the menu, into function settings, and look at power savings, and I've got a display off. I've currently got it set to 10 minutes. By default, I think it's 1 minute or 30 seconds, and so it turns off really quickly. So I'm going to set it to 10 minutes, head back out of there, and now I'm going to flip the screen around and do all of my actions from the front of the camera. I said I wanted it up around eye level. To do that, I'll just get the tripod into the right space, right height. I'm going to use the table because it's here, and we'll start with the camera in this position. And let's have a look at what's going on. So we can see that the lens is now fully out at 15 millimeters, and we'll use this as our guide as we set up, just making sure the tripod is steady. And we can see the light is on one side of my face. Let's get the M50 recording so we can see it in that space. I've got an ISO of 200, I've got a shutter speed of 1/50. My highlights are blown out outside, but I'm going to expose for my face throughout today. But we can see there's a really dark fall off on one side of my face with just the light from one side. If I move closer to the window, that may be a little better, but again, I may have to spin the camera around and come right up against the window if I want to give myself a better image using just one source of light. Let's get some other lights on. And we'll look at framing as we go, but we do need to get a light on. Let's see. We'll try We'll try an underlight from the side and see how that looks. So now I've got light from two sides, but the light is in the shot. So I get it up, over. It's still in the shot, but as I frame it down, if I climb in to sort of 35 millimeters, suddenly lights out of the shot. Do I love this view? Not particularly. I've got a lot of shadow under one eye. So there's more that we can do. But yeah, let's keep going with this. We've got another light higher up. I'll try that. And that's a little bit better because I've got less of this dark shadow on my face. But overall, it's not working for me because I've got light, strong light on one side, strong light on the other, and I've got this dark section down the middle. So I can move one of the lights more centrally. And I can step back a little bit, so I've got more light coming from the window, or I can move over a little bit. It's okay. What I'm liking about this shot immediately is the natural skin tones are coming out. We can also see that the background is quite dark and we don't have any shadows on the wall. My shirt is working somewhat in this space, but my head is a bit floating in space because we've got this dark area down low and darkness behind me. So at the moment I'm kind of all hands and head. And at this point it may be worth switching out a t-shirt. I'll do that really, really quickly without putting one on. Just see if I can tone down the blackness and the contrast between my face and the background. Yeah, already, so if I was to be here in this position, I'd probably use something like a blue shirt. This one seems a little too light because it's giving me better balance. I always use blank shirts, I find that logos stand out too much on camera, and I want to return attention to the content rather than any logos. I will say though that I love these shirts from +2 Clothing. They're super long and thin, and being tall, I really love that. So I'll just throw that one over the top and have a look at the overall balance. Am I still a head floating in space? I prefer it, and I kind of like how you got a little bit of light coming off the shoulder, so I'll play with moving lights closer to me throughout this. But overall, I'm not happy with this light, but I'm happy that we've now got two sources of light rather than one. I'm not happy with the background, I'm not happy with the light. Okay, so what can we do here? Well, number one, I want to use that background behind me, so I'll move the camera over so I've got a little bit more light coming off the wall. I'll switch on these overhead lights, see if that makes a difference. And that's quite good, although now I've got a shiny spot on my head from this light. So if I put that down, let's see if that makes a difference. Now we're starting to get a feel for it. Again, there feels like there's more light on the wall behind me than in the previous shot as I've shifted the camera around. And my shirt before was disappearing into the blackness. Now there is more of a contrast between my shirt and the background, and also my face and the background. I like that, so we'll play with that a little bit more. We can do that by throwing the 100-watt globe against the back wall. So I get my extension cord. I'll also chuck on a power board because I might want to throw the taller lamp over here as well at some point. You'll notice I have bare feet on. There's two reasons why I have bare feet. Firstly, I'm in Australia and it's kind of a good way of life to have bare feet. And the second reason is it just lessens the noise as I walk. And if I was in a harder floor place, like in my kitchen, then I would wear bare feet as well, because that just removes some of that noise as I move through the space. And one of the secrets I have for you is, if you're ever filming other people, or you're outside and you're moving, if you take your shoes off, you will move a lot smoother through the space. So you'll be more stable in your footage if you're holding a camera and you're walking with bare feet. It's just naturally what happens. Whereas when we wear shoes, we can be quite heel heavy. And so we're kind of bouncing up and down as we move. And that's where that lack of stability comes in. If we've got bare feet, we tend to glide more. And I'll show you with the DJI Osmo. Let's get the angle right. We've lit the wall behind me. We've got more of that pop, and we still don't have any shadow behind me from these two lights. I feel like if I switched off that light... See, one of the things that I really dislike about filming is that you can just get the shadow effect behind you when you have a light on. I'm trying to see if I can recreate it. Yeah, so there's a little bit of a shadow on the wall just over here. And oftentimes that can just pop out of nowhere. So for instance, if I was talking to camera here, I don't need to move very much for the background shadow to appear. And one of the ways we can deal with that background shadow is to eliminate it completely by lighting the wall directly, which is what we were just doing and what we'll continue to do. Well, that's quite good. I'm quite evenly lit. I have a couple of lights on my side that are very close to me. One thing I'm noticing that is that my eyes are a little dark set. And that could be useful in a shot like this, or it might be something I wish to change. In this case, I do wish to change it, so we're going to shake it up a little bit. If I move back, I'm not sure how the light is working. Obviously, the closer I get to these lights, and I'm just playing around, I'm just looking for something that I like, and as soon as I see it, I'll latch onto different aspects, like this brutal contrast between my shirt and the background. I'm already liking that, so I'm latching onto that. And as I come close to the lights on the side, more of my face gets lit up, I've got a shadow under it, and as I step back, it softens. And the further away I go from those lights, the softer they are. So I'm starting to get fall off on my face. And I can really tune that fall off by how far back the lights are, or I could throw a diffuser on them, and where I want to be in the space. Okay, I'm happy with some of that fall off, and the light on the wall could be stronger. We'll get it up a little bit higher. And don't worry if this chair is in the shot. I'll often do stuff like this just to have a look at how it appears. There's something a little bit, what's this? This is like the original, it's like the original Blade Runner with the light coming up out of it. It's a little godlike. Maybe some people like that. This could have its use in different times. I think I'll move the camera over a little bit more so I have a little bit more light coming from the window. I've got a shadow on the wall. I think that's from the guitar. Where is it? Let me have a look. I'm not sure where that's coming from. I think it might be bouncing off this. Right. I can put this upper light hard against the wall, which should pull it off my head as well. I have a light above me in the ceiling. I can tune that right down so it's completely out of the way. I don't like that as much. I'm a bit dark on my head, and in general, to look natural, we want a little bit of light coming from above. So I'll just adjust that. Alright, sorry, I suddenly can't see because I've been looking at too many lights, and that can happen. One of the things I like about this shot is that I can still use my hands if I want to. I can demonstrate objects, or I can hold things in my hand and show you how they appear. And that's really the main use of this hat. I didn't have any other use for it, but if I'm holding something and talking about it, it's going to work well, unless it's black like my shirt. If I take this hat and throw it on my head, maybe that works because I still have light in my eyes from these other two lights. If I switch them off and just have the overhead light, you'll notice how immediately my eyes disappear and the shot does not look as good. Okay, so now I've just got the cap on and you can probably see a little bit of one eye, but the other will be completely black because the light above me is sitting there. If I'm talking like this, suddenly I'm not as visible. And this is a good hint for if you're shooting in the middle of the day or you're outside and people have hats on or sunglasses, you can just lose that personal connection quite quickly in film. Thought I'd just bring a hat along to show you. That's it, I'm not going to be using a hat in the studio. All right. Okay, we played with a couple of lights. I like the idea of having a dark background. In my last studio, I set up a black background and then I would shoot directly from the window with a dark background behind me. And I like how that isolates the face and isolates the skin tones. And I just think it's a good look. Here, it's not going to work as well for two reasons. Number one, we have the bed in the background, so you're always going to see that in the shot. You're always going to see these other areas in the shot, like the skirting board, because we don't have a fully black background. And number two is that it's just not dark enough. Even in my last studio with a fully black background, it still had light reflecting off it from a window similar to this as it moved through the space. And so in post-processing, I would drop the blacks to make it fully black. And in this case, I want to do less and less in post-processing, and I want to do more and more just in camera. And so one of my goals today is to set it up so that I don't need to do post-processing, for instance, lifting the shadows here so more of my face is visible. If I can do that in camera, it just smooths out my workflow massively. Okay, I've got some lights back on. To review footage, I'll go up to the camera. Now I'm used to this camera, I'll just simply stop recording and I'll reach around the back and you'll see that there's a play button and I just know where it is, so I'll just hit that and I'll hit play. I'll skip ahead to a section I want to look at and I can review the lighting using this display. And that's, my eyesight isn't going to move across the room to the point where I can see this clearly. So I need to move in and replay a footage. I quite like this shot now that I'm closer to it because what it's doing is it's accentuating my jawline because of the shadow from the other lights. So even though I'm sort of lit up evenly across my face, there is a framing occurring underneath my chin and I like that effect. We're not done with lighting, let's experiment a little bit more. First of all, we can just change where the 100-watt globe is. I mentioned that my eyes aren't really popping with this view, they're a little dark, so I can put the 100-watt globe in front of me more and we'll just see what that does to my overall face. I may need to diffuse it and I may need to get it up a little higher than it is, but I can just jimmy it up with a few blocks or my speakers to see what it's like. So let's have a look at how that's affected my eyes. Suddenly the first thing I notice is that suddenly this side of my face is well lit and this side is less well lit. So it's kind of flipped the main area. I'm just playing around looking for things that I like. And what I noticed immediately in this shot is that one side of my face is lit well and the background is opposite. So the foreground, we have this side well lit and this side darker. And in the background, it's more well lit on this side than that side. And what that's doing is allowing contrast between both sides of my face and the background. So the darker side of my face has a higher contrast with the light background, and the light side of my face has a higher contrast because of the darker background on this side. Having said that, I just don't like this. I'm not sure what it is about the lighting. I think it's my eyes. So I'm not a fan of this one. I'm going to keep experimenting. And I'll go back to having this light behind me. And first of all, I'm going to just hold it in my hand and see if I can adjust what's going on based on my hand, on where the light is shining. So I can play around with light. It doesn't have to be fully static. That's just shining out the window, so nothing's going on. If I send it up to the ceiling, what does that do to the overall ambient light? And if it looks like I'm not looking at you, that's because I'm looking at the screen as I'm going. So that's with it directly on the back wall, and I've got kind of a halo effect behind me, but I like how I'm exposed, and you'll notice, for instance, in this shot, that the background is starting to appear white. It's clearly not, it's clearly a grey background, but with that high light load, it's overexposing in the image and it's rendering it white. I like that, especially as there's this fall off to the sides where it's more grey. Unfortunately, what I'm not liking about that fall off is there's more of a hard line between this darker grey and this white space. So we'll see if we can adjust that. I'm also going to just try what happens if I put the light directly behind me. I'm enjoying that kind of glow underneath my arm. So what happens if I shine it directly up? Then this is almost like a godlike view where you have a godlike being coming down with light shining from them. So maybe it's a megalomania issue for me, but I think it's more just the visual. I love that sense of contrast. So this could work. This could be an effective way to light. Now clearly I'm just holding it behind me, which is not ideal. So once I get a situation set up that I like, then and only then I can sort of set up more of a permanent setup. So if I did like this, then I look at an object that I could put behind me, a bench or a top of a chair or something, and I'll place it on top. If it's rickety, then I won't do it. So let's see what happens if I do this. Yeah, I probably wouldn't do that permanently, but I would shoot an entire video like this just to see if that's going to work. And if it does work for the video, then I'll look at how I make that just a bit of a stronger setup. I'm going to review this footage because I think I like it. I've got one I'm happy with. We have a bunch of lights facing where I'm standing. So they are very close to directly in front of the camera. So we have one light source slightly off to the side. In fact, I'll put it really close. So it's right next to the camera itself. What that's doing is giving some fill directly to me, although from a distance, in addition to the open window providing most of the light on me. This light should also be pointed more towards me. And what that's giving is a bit of fall off on one side of my face, good lighting directly from the window, and behind me I've got the wall lit up with the 100-watt globe. Now I've spaced it out from the wall, and that way it's giving a smooth surface to the wall. Because we've got such a smooth fall off with the background behind me, it doesn't matter what my aperture is. In this case, I've set it to 5. I've got autofocus occurring on the Canon M50, and the depth of focus in this plane will mean that my nose will be in focus and my ears will be in focus. So this is fine for presenting to camera. If instead my background was super messy and I had a bit of distance between myself and that background, then I might set my aperture to a much lower figure and use a different lens just to get that background blur and get that smoothness that I'm getting naturally in camera with this light source away from the wall. With that said, I'm going to switch out the kit lens that zooms from 15 to 45 millimeters with a prime lens set to 35 millimeters. And let's take a look at how that appears. It should be like this. I'll put the adapter on first. Set the aperture to 2.8. Great looking lens. I have literally never used this before, so I have no idea what results we'll get. All right, that's with an aperture of 2.8, and we can see that it is super bright compared with the kit lens. I'm gonna have to manually focus this one. Just lean the camera in a little bit. I'll focus on the guitar manually. I'm using peaking. You can see the framing of this shot is very similar to the 35mm on the kit lens. It's just, is there a benefit to using this lens over the 15 to 45? Just adjusting the aperture. So now it may be a little sharper. I've moved a little closer to the lens and I've adjusted the focus, but I'm still not happy with my overall framing in the shot. There's a little bit too much space above my head, or I'm a little too far away. We'll start by just angling down a little bit. All right, that's a little bit better. I'm a little happier with that positioning. Before I go any further, the other thing I'll do is just move my head around as if I'm talking naturally. And the reason I'm doing this is because the light may fall differently depending on where I'm looking or the facial features that I'm using. It's better for me to face slightly off camera and talk to camera, or if it's better to be a little away from the window talking to the camera like this. And these movements will help me establish what is going to be the best lighting. And so I can adjust the focus distance without adjusting the background and without adjusting any of these lights. The sound so far, the sound has come purely from the lapel mic and possibly also from directly in the Canon M50 in stereo. Let's plug in a directional mic and just see if that makes any difference. I'm now using a directional mic. Am I in focus? I've got a little bit of the Dylan sign behind me. So I'm looking at all these elements as I pull it together. And look, your situation may be really, really different to what you're seeing. I'm just walking you through my process and hoping you can get a few ways of thinking about lighting that will help you for your room, which may be different to this. How's this microphone comparing to the lapel mic? Let's look at some other angles. We've had the front on view at eye level. Let's see if we can get a shot looking down at me. And to do that, I've placed the tripod on top of the desk just to elevate it. It's quite high up, and now it is higher than some of these lights. We've kept the 100-watt bulb gently and smoothly lighting up the back wall, and we've simply lifted the tripod. Let's take a look at how that is. I've stayed with the 35mm prime. I hope I'm in focus. I could just switch back to the 15 to 45mm at this point and zoom in or out based on how I want to be framed. But one of the main benefits of lifting the camera up above the speaker is that you can now bring hands and gestures into the image more easily. Now if I step back a little bit more, it's probably going to be more apparent, but just take a look at how well my hands are lit in this shot, because they're very close to these lights, and in fact I can pull the lights even closer because they're out of shot, and suddenly whatever I have in my hands is going to be really well lit. And we'll experiment just by using this guitar and see how the light is bouncing off it. You know, there's a bit of reflective nature on this guitar, so we might find that it is reflecting back at you. But generally, if I was doing a tutorial on guitar, well then it's going to be very clear what's going on. You can see where my hands are. There's not a lot of shadow there. We've got light from all the sides, and this is going to be a very, very clear way to shoot when you have the light coming in at the hands, but it's also coming up onto the face, and I love this style of lighting. We'll lift the lens up even just a little bit higher, and you'll notice I'm not as cramped when I demonstrate. Get some of that skirting board out of the shot. A little bit more, a little bit more. That keeps the skirting board out of the shot, keeps my hands in the frame. And this method, in fact, I'll step back a little bit further, I may move out of focus, but you can see suddenly I have a lot more of my body in the frame. Let's get you into focus. Yes, I have my object close to me. I can bring a light even closer in, keep it out of shot. There it's in shot. Just drop it slightly and head it back. There we go. This way I have the light coming from the window. I've also got a light off to the side, and that is lighting my hands. And now I can hold whatever I want in my hands, and I can be more relaxed. That's how high the camera is. It's way above me, and I'm looking up towards the camera, and I quite like this view. I could, if I wanted to, put on a wider lens back on the 15mm, and I'm not going to mind if I get a little bit of the carpet in, because it's kind of dark. Let's try that. Alright, back on autofocus makes things a lot easier. So we're set to 15mm, we can see a lot more of the room. What happens if we just bring it in a little bit tighter? Still we've got more of a skirting board lit up. Yeah, I'm not too happy with this shot. I think this is no good. It's just too dominant. This is how it appears when I'm facing the window directly, and I've angled the camera down slightly. I mean, it's almost level. It's only angling slightly up at me, and already we can see we've got this horrible division between the grey walls and the white roof. Even if it was all white, you're still going to see that edge depending on what your cornices are like. And we can also see that there are lights in the corners. So overall, I'm not happy with this image. It's not something that I would use. But how can we adjust this? Well, let's just try lifting up the camera, see if we can get more of a grey wall. All right, it's looking a little bit better. And then I can still see a little bit of the white line of the roof. Let's angle it down. And here's where we hit a couple of problems. It's already better, by the way. I think this is infinitely better. Okay, great. We've lost the line of the ceiling. We've just got the grey wall behind us. Unfortunately, as we've lowered the camera, we've also introduced some of the lower elements, and now we can see the bedspread. So it's very difficult in a situation like this to lose the line at the top and lose the floor line, especially if you've got furniture in the space like this. Now, what can we do with this? In general, I would say I prefer having the doona or the bedspread in the shot than having that white line of the ceiling. And I also think that this direct engagement at an eye level is more of a human and more of a peer-to-peer conversation. Okay, already that is better, and because the bedspread is some distance away, we have some of the blur, and that's improving the image quite a lot. Alright, I've made a couple of changes. I switched off the ceiling lights that were on that back wall. I've still got the light coming from the window. I've moved my close-in light just off to the side of the camera, so it's very close to the camera, and so far I'm quite liking that shot. I would say I'm a little bit orange, so the white balance does need to be set. That's something I leave until the end because I want to get my contrast right, I want to get the overall framing right, and then I'll do the white balancing. Now that I'm facing the window, we can look at what other lights might be added to this shot. But I'll start with no lights, no ceiling lights, nothing, just the window. And the reason I'm doing that is to set the overall exposure for the ambient light. And we can see from the window light that my cheekbones are lit up, and I also have some light generally across my neck. So these will be more of the shaded areas. I mean, that's effectively the darkest it's going to be when I start to add more light. So the first thing I'll do is I'll put on this light that's behind me. It's just off my shoulder and to the rear. And that's added something already. We've got this light across my cheekbones, and it's giving us something different. I quite like this shot in and of itself. This could be a good talking head shot, although again, my head's sort of floating in this dark space, and I want to smooth that out. And I'll do that by switching on a light that's very close to me. It's a little bit more orange, so the overall light balance is going to shift a little bit. I have to change my ISO to help with that. Alright, so I might bump it up a tiny bit. There we go. So I began by looking at the ambient light, which is still appearing on my neck and various places, but now with this other light up to the left, I've got more of a smooth fill over me. I'm still a bit of a floating head, and this is an example where I would switch out my t-shirt. I often find in this situation that a white shirt won't work because it's simply too high a contrast to the background, and it's just going to take all the attention, whereas you do want the attention on the face. So let's see how white would appear. Yeah, it starts to be, for starters, I look super tanned when I put on a white shirt like this. It's just too bright. Let's try a grey one. The key thing is that the lights that I use will change the depth of this grey based on where it is in the space. For me, it's still a little bit too dark. Even if I put a light right on it, it's not working. So we want something in between a white and this dark grey, or this. I wanted to set my white balance. I'm going to use a grey card, or in this case, because the room is grey, I'm just going to use one of the walls. But there is something I need to pay attention to, which is that each of these lights are a slightly different colour. So this is more of a golden colour, the one that's predominantly on my face, and the others are more of a daylight, and of course I have daylight coming through the main window. So in order to match this colour of this light, I need to take a photo of a wall using this colour globe up against the grey wall, and that will set my white balance correctly. So I just need to find a spot where I can take a photo of a wall in this light, and this looks like a good spot just because there's no other lights on it. So I grab my camera and I'm going to switch it to fully manual mode and click OK, and you can see that it's really already quite orange in its colour. From here I go into the menu, shooting settings, white balance, set it to custom, choose the custom image, which is that one, hit set, click OK, head back. I'm not sure this is going to work. I think it might be a bit too orange. As I suspected, that wall was too orange when I took that photo, and so the colors aren't right as a result. So I'm going to manually adjust my color balance. White balance is off and I'm a little blue, well, a lot blue. I'm going to adjust the white balance by clicking on the Q set button, and then I'm going to choose the white balance section, set the color temperature. I'm just going to eyeball it until it gets loses some of that blue, introduces some of the warmth and skin tones that I want. And I'm pretty happy with that. We've got it at 3500. Looks pretty good to me. It's no longer orange, it's no longer blue. And already we can see that that is much better, much more accurate. I'm happier with the color temperature. I think I've found some lighting that's going to work for me in this space. Let's break down what we've covered. First of all, it's about looking at the space as a whole. What are the distances between the walls? Where can you set up your tripod? And where's the primary light source? In this case, because I just have one window, I start with that. I see how that is giving me an ambient light across my body and my face. And from here, I start to add in other lights. Before I do that, I want to assess what my background is. Is it going to be a messy bed that's going to distract the viewers from my content? Maybe you didn't notice that the bed is messy during this section of the video. And this is one of the key points. It probably doesn't matter as much to your audience as it will to you, but you need to be comfortable with how your studio is set up and how you're filming. And here's the smallest example of that. There is a screw in the wall. I notice it, but most people won't notice it unless I draw attention to it. And my audience won't care, and your audience won't care if you've got a screw on the wall or a fly on the edge of your face or an ant crawling across your shoulder. You'll notice it because you're editing the video, but your audience will be moving on. What are they expecting in the next piece of content? So go easy on yourself. These kind of issues aren't as important. You'll notice them, you'll want to make it better. Just make it better in the next video. It doesn't matter for this video. Don't put some words across the bottom of your screen indicating that there's a screw in the wall. Just live with it, move on, and get better in your next video. All right, so we have our background. We're starting to introduce light sources. We've spoken about how you can use a light up onto a wall to create even fill. It's not quite even in this setup, but it creates an even fill. We've looked at how you can position your light source on either side of the window and the tripod, so you have it at a pretty low angle. From here, then you can start to add other details. The color of the shirts you're wearing or the clothing that you're wearing. You can start to set your white balance, and you can start to set your focal lengths. You can also, well, before this, you should adjust the level of your camera, because that will frame up the view. Of course, you can apply this to any situation. It doesn't need to be a bedroom. It could be a kitchen, a workshop, it could be outside. And in fact, a lot of the techniques that we've covered today can be used outside. I used to film a lot in an undercover area that was shaded from direct sunlight. So I had a balcony similar to this that hung over the edge. I had a wall behind me, and I had this big bright light source in front of me, like a softbox, completely lighting me up and giving me a good backdrop. So these techniques work in the studio and when you're out and about.